So I'm going to welcome Tom Standage and Emma Hogan. Excellent. I think I'll go and I'll stay over here.
We're kind of like
Okay.
spread ourselves out equally.
All
Okay,
right,
so
sure.
this
Oh.
is
You're in the wrong.
Oh, yeah, we have to switch.
We
Tom.
need to sit in the right order
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we've got to be in the same order as it says
All
on the
right.
screen. Otherwise, everyone's heads will explode. Okay, so what I think we can usefully do is if we each give our highlights.
Yep.
And then we want to hear from you. So it's Ask the Economist. So ask us to do things differently. Ask us to cover things differently. Ask us to cover stories we're not covering. And just generally tell us what you think we could be doing better or differently. So my highlights, given the kind of mission that we have, which is to give you useful, practical advice on going from the path for advocacy, the various light bulb moments that I had around this were when Kenji made the point that you could be an advocate at the same time as being when in Rome, for example. So it's not the case that every company is in one bucket or another. You can be in multiple buckets, and you can be in multiple buckets in the same country. And I thought that was a very, very good point. And so that also means that the path to advocacy is sort of easier than you think it is, because you don't have to be an advocate everywhere to count as an advocate. You just have to start being an advocate somewhere. So I thought that was very good. I thought Tiernan was great on kind of meeting people where they are and the practicality of, you don't advocate by saying you're wrong and I'm right and let me tell you how you should see the world, but meeting people where they are. And then this idea that we had from lots of people that personal stories, we had this from Danica, we had this from Ben Rattray, are the thing that really changed people's minds, are the most effective. And just generally, I think we had the same advice from lots of people who said, do what's right and don't count the cost. Speak up, but you also have to do more than speak up. You have to show that you're sincere through actions as well as words. So that, for me, was the highlights. What about you, Emma?
Well, it's hard to choose, so it's quite a lot to choose from. I think there are two things, though. The first one is in my session with Natalie Egan, when she said that, when someone asks you, what do you do to a colleague that has come out as transgender? She said, congratulate them. That's a kind of a key concrete takeaway that I think is very simple and it's effective. And the second thing was from my workshop with Fabrice Houdat from the UN, when he said that homophobia affects the poorest hardest. I think you could apply that to transphobia as well, in terms of both in terms of the poor are the most likely to be sort of hurt by homophobia, but also from my session with Simon Casal, where he said about how poverty can also entrench homophobic attitudes if you're relying on sort of handouts from religious organizations who might have an alternative agenda as well. So I thought that was sort of very striking.
What about you, Gady?
Well, one which I took actually from one of your panels, but also inspired by the fact that Reverend Barber was going to be on my panel in the afternoon. And it actually speaks to, we're going to ask you what we can do better. I think what Mitchell Gold said about how reporters need to go and talk to faith leaders who actually are progressive on these issues and are embracing the LGBTQ community, rather than focusing on the kind of conservative firebrands and their hate, which is what the media is drawn to. I think we can do a much better job of showing the other segments of the faith community and representing them in the media, and hopefully showing that there is another model for people to follow in the faith community. So that was one. And then the other was the documentary filmmaker that I spoke to earlier, Tana Eshagian. I'm not sure if she's still here, but there was a beautiful moment in her film, in her documentary, which I recommend you watch, where an Iranian official is speaking at a conference about transgender issues, and was talking about how this is approved to have transition surgery. And for those imams who would say that this is wrong because it's changing something that God made, think about the fact that we do this every day. We change what God made every day, even when we turn wheat into flour, into bread. And I thought that was a pretty nice moment in a film that had both kind of the light and the dark of this issue in Iran. But it was nice to remember that those kinds of progressive attitudes can happen even in places where, for instance, homosexuality is still banned. There are people with some progressive ideas that they are pushing forward.
Okay, so we're going to open things up to you. We've got our notebooks out. Tell us what you'd like us to do differently. Should we start over here?
Hello. I thought it was an excellent day, which, the fact that I'm still here is a testament to that. So thank you. I would only suggest in the future, I've been to so many LGBT conferences. I've been to Out and Equal probably 7 times over the last 15 years. It's so rare that we hear from a speaker who identifies as bisexual. It's so rare that we explore the B in the alphabet soup. And I would really love to give visibility and discussion and attention to that letter of the alphabet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. This is Chris from Amazon. Great conference. This is my first time. My only suggestion would be maybe a little more time to get up and stretch. It's a lot of sitting. I actually have a question. So Tom, a couple times today you mentioned about The Economist, the classical liberal values, and that struck me as very odd. I can't ever imagine an American media company proudly proclaiming their classical, liberal values. So why is that important to The Economist, and also doesn't that make you a target for criticism?
The problem is that the word liberal means different things in different parts of the world. So we're using it in the 19th century classical liberal sense of John Stuart Mill, and that's the tradition that we come out of intellectually. And liberalism is sort of, we express that in terms of free markets, but also freedom of individuals. So that means we are in favor of social liberalism, including LGBT rights, and we're also in favor of free markets, and so free trade was one of the founding causes of The Economist. Now, this is something that people have a lot of trouble getting their heads around because it means we agree with the right on markets and with the left on social issues. But we think that that's actually more consistent. Because the right says we should have free markets, but we should be intervening in the bedroom. And the left says, no, we shouldn't have free markets, but we should have free people. And we think that you should have freedom in both of those places. So at the US, we are accused of being liberal because we agree because we take a liberal position on social issues. In France, for example, we're accused of being too liberal and therefore right-wing because we support free markets and open markets and sort of not having governments intervening all the time and picking winners. So essentially, it's the way that the word liberal is used elsewhere, and we're kind of sticking to the original version of it. But yeah, people have trouble getting their heads around this. They say, is The Economist on the left or the right? And people say, oh, a terrible leftist European rag that supports, socialized healthcare, how terrible. But at the same time, people say, no, they're terribly right-wing and they support free markets and privatization. So people have real difficulty getting their heads around this, but there is a consistent position, and it is classical liberalism.
We're taking liberalism back.
Exactly.
Well, it's Nasir. I've come here for the first time. Here I am.
Here you are. Thank you.
It was a magnanimous day. There was a little, suggestion that I would like to make is that those people who are opposing LGBTQ and they need to be seated, and it will trigger a debate whether those people, like a friend, one of the speakers said that there is a difference between state and religion. Those people who are advocating religion and opposing LGBTQ to live, even exist in somehow in some other, like some part of the world, they need to be, seated so that they need to be taught that humans are, to be respected, and LGBTQ people are humans.
I don't think we disagree with that, but how do you think that we could reflect that in our programming?
Yeah, I mean, like those people who are existing, they're religious, and they would like to dissent with the idea of LGBTQ, and they are there across the world. I mean, you'll find them on Twitter and so many people. This is what my little suggestion is, if you can take it.
Okay, so we could hear from our opponents, as it were. I mean, that's what we're trying to do with Open Future. We are trying to go out into the battle place of ideas. So thank you. Do we have any more suggestions or comments? Going once? Oh, no, we do. We have someone. Sorry, I can't see the hand. Beg your pardon.
Hi there, name is Achilles. Just one recommendation. I think that there was lots of great sessions. I wish that some of them may have been a little bit longer, so perhaps in the future less, giving some more airtime to some of the speakers.
So fewer, longer sessions would be.
Yeah.
Okay. Would anyone like to argue against that and say, no, more shorter sessions?
We can have an open future debate on length of session.
Oh, we have a question down at the front or a comment at the front.
No, it's not a question. I liked the length of the session. I thought the pace was actually excellent. It kept us engaged in different topics. I loved it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Should we be looking at this? We've got the result of a survey that we just asked you about, didn't we? Which is basically what should the objective be after legalizing same-sex marriage? What should be the next sort of priority? And we have basically general anti-discrimination and embodying that in law is the clear winner, both on Twitter and here. So there's more to be done.
But you can't get that until you get religious acceptance.
Right. The religious angle of this is something we should probably be paying more attention to next year.
Yeah,
Right.
would have loved to talk more about that today.
Go ahead.
So my name is Manita Sharma with Biogen. Question around the supporters for this conference. Biogen, we've been with you since the beginning, and I want to understand, given the geopolitical environment, are you seeing it to be more challenging to get more companies involved with supporting this conference? I think it's an incredible opportunity for supporters to be much more vocal and putting their money.
Well, thank you for your
this.
support. We should say that we sit on the editorial side of The Economist, so we have a church and state divide at The Economist, and we are not involved in going out and finding the sponsors. So I'm sure somebody from the business side of The Economist could answer that question, but we are not involved in that kind of discussion, I'm afraid.
I'm also from Biogen. I'm Andrew. My feedback would be on some of the polling. It seemed very binary, and leading.
Yeah. It's really difficult to come up with poll questions that aren't cheesy. Believe me, we do. And it's not just the nature of this topic. It's actually really difficult generally to come up with a kind of, a question where the answer that you're expecting isn't blindingly obvious. So, but we will redouble our efforts. We will try better. Okay, shall we wrap?
I think
Any more?
it.
Okay, there's one more thing I wanted to add before we finish, which is that The Economist is working on something, and I wanted to ask for your help. We want to put together an LGBT rights index that is global, because we do things globally, and looks at both social and legal indicators. And we've come up with a way of doing this. The initial cut of it, which we want to produce later this year, will have 50 countries that cover all of the regions of the world. But obviously, that's not all the countries of the world, but that's where we want to start. We have 10 social and 10 legal indicators. And the idea is to look at these rights in two ways. One, what do the laws say? What's on the books? So theoretically, what's the environment? And then in practice, what is the environment like on the ground? The first lot of questions is relatively easy to answer because you can see what the laws are in a given country. So we have those 10 different things, and we rank all the countries, and that's quite straightforward. The social one is much more difficult because it does require some kind of judgment about what the environment is like, and that requires direct experience of what is going on. We've developed this set of indicators in conjunction with Outright Action and the Kaleidoscope Trust, two NGOs, and we've shared them with the people you'd expect us to, ILGA World, ILGA Europe, the UNDP, and the World Bank. And they're all very pleased that we're doing this because they all have data sets that sort of cover some of this, but none of them have all of this. And some of those organizations would be unwilling to get involved in a sort of exercise like this that ranks countries because that would be too overtly political. But they're very happy to help us and give us their data. So they have, but we've still got only about 65% of the data we need. So what we could really use your help with, please, is identifying individuals or networks who can help us answer the 10 social questions in particular in the countries where we don't have coverage. So if you think you might be able to help us on that, please come and find me afterwards, and I'll give you my card, and I will connect you with Jane Shaw in our data department, who is putting together this index. But we would greatly appreciate any help you could give us. I've already asked Ty Cobb, by the way, from the HRC, because it sounded as though he's well plugged into these sorts of networks. But any help you could offer there would be greatly appreciated. OK, well, that brings us to the end. So I'd like to thank my co-hosts, Gady and Emma. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Alex Partners, Morgan Stanley, T. Rowe Price, and William Blair, who are our global supporters, and our regional ally, Biogen. I'd like to thank all the speakers and all of you for participating and asking questions and just getting so involved and keeping it so interactive throughout the day. I'd like to thank the AV team for performing miracles with video link-ups and things. And I'd like to thank the events team who make this all happen behind the scenes. Please do fill in the feedback survey. It's in the app. And if you fill it in, we'll give you one of these lovely Economist moleskin notebooks. So there's an incentive if ever there was one. And I think that's absolutely everything. So it's just all remains for me to say thank you all very much. And let's go next door and have a drink. And see you next year.
Thank you.